Yeah, Justin, I see your hand. Let's hear you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about the fact that a rock is a large mass of stone
Mm-hmm.
or mineral matter
Okay.
found in the Earth's crust.
Great, great. That is perfect. That is excellent. All right. I saw is that Everesta? Let's hear you too. What do you have for us? Yeah, Everesta.
Yes, she said.
Yes, rocks, 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 rocks. Okay, so basically, rocks are masses of stone, all right, that are found in the Earth's crust, right? Let's go on and look at importance of rocks. What are some of the
Please
importance of
tell
rocks?
the person to mute and mute the
Large mass that are found in the earth.
Okay, let's look at the importance of rocks. Importance of rocks. Yeah, so raise your hand, and then when I call you, you unmute and answer. Yes, Kalu Grace. Grace Kalu. Importance of rocks. Give us one.
They serve as materials for many industries.
Yes, yes, they are used by many industries as raw materials. Evarista, again, let's hear you.
They check erosion.
Yes, rocks are used as a means of checking erosion. Vino Ansel, let's hear you.
So rocks act as a tourist attraction site.
Yes, great, great. We have the umbrella rock in Ghana. We have many rock structures that people go and visit um, um, for tourism. All right, so let's look at the types of rocks that we have. In the first place, how many types are there? Yes, Gloria Sam.
Say please say.
Yes, there are 3 types of rocks. Yes, what are they? Ansel.
Sedimentary rock.
Sedimentary rocks. Good. Who is mentioning another one? Luis.
The igneous rocks.
Igneous rocks. Great.
So
And
metamorphic rocks.
metamorphic rocks. Great, great. Okay. I have given you, I think, a lot of notes on rocks. So read them and make sure that you don't lag behind. Okay, let's go into our lesson for today and continue with weathering. All right, the last time I think we looked at weathering, and we said that it is the process by which rocks break down into smaller particles, and these particles eventually become the soil particles that support plant growth, right? We shall be looking at the types of weathering and how each of them occurs. All right. So we have physical weathering. Now, basically, physical weathering has to do with the the change in the size and then the minerals, the change in the size or the change in the size and amount of the minerals that make up the rock, right? The size of the rock itself and the amount of the minerals that make up the rock, right? So it is physical weathering is normally caused Yes, Sam Gloria, what's your hand up for?
Sir, please, I can't see the screen.
Is it the same for everyone? Can you all see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Gloria, why aren't you seeing the screen?
Sir, please, I
So
don't
I can
know.
only see Sunrise Christian School.
Really?
I can't see what you are reading. I can only see Sunrise Christian High.
Okay, hold on. Uh,
We can see now.
you can see now, right? Okay,
Yes, sir.
you can see.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. So I was saying that physical weathering has to do with the rock changing in size, of course, reducing in size, and then the amount of minerals that make up the rock also reducing in quantity. Okay. Now, what causes the physical weathering? It is caused by changes in temperature, by water, and then by wind. All right. Now, let's look at how temperature influences the breakdown of rocks. All right. Now, wide temperature differences. For instance, we have very hot days and very cold nights. All right. These this changes influence um, the disintegration of rocks. All right. What happens is that at high temperatures, the rocks would expand, and then when the temperatures reduce, the rocks will contract. All right. So now, if this um, um, contraction and expansion continues over a long period of time, then stress or unnecessary pressure will be created on the rocks. All right. Then with time, the rocks will tear apart and crack into smaller pieces. Do you understand that? So in the temperate regions where temperatures are very low, sometimes even low below freezing points, the water in the rock crevices will freeze. Now, when water freezes, it becomes solid, right? As a result, it will expand in the process. All right. Now, when the water in the crevice of the rock expands, then it makes the rocks also expand. All right. Now, the expansion would now make the rock to crack. I hope you understand that.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. So in
Yes,
the
sir.
picture I have here, you would see water in the crevices of the rock. You see water collect in the rock. Then at very low temperatures, the water freezes and becomes solid. Mm? Then with time, the ice will cool down or will melt. All right. And then the water will get deeper into the rock. All right. Now, when this repeat expansion and contraction continues for a long time, then the rock will finally disintegrate. In this picture, I hope you understand. Let's go on and look at the next one.
Yes.
Let's look at how water also influences uh, uh, um, the breaking down of rocks. Now we'll look at water in the form of rivers, or in the form of water in rivers and streams and runoffs. All right. Now, the water in these water bodies are always moving. They are fleeting, all right? Now, as they move, they carry some of the things that are in them. We call them sediments, including rocks. Now, rocks that are cracking in water are called boulders, all right? Now, as the water current carries them along, they hit each other. They hit other sediments and they hit other obstacles in their way, all right? Now, this continuous hitting of the rocks against these other structures will eventually cause the rocks to crack into smaller pieces, all right? Now, if you go to the temperate zones, the cold regions, if the rocks pass over these over ice on the iceberg, what happens is that the ice tears off, all right, or grinds off parts of the rock as the rock passes over them. So that's why
Oh, please, can a person mute him or herself?
please, who is that?
Please, you're in class.
Please come again.
I'm saying that when the water is moving, all right, it carries along with it boulders, the boulders in the water, all right. Then they hit on each other and on other obstacles in the water. Now, as that continues, they crack and become smaller and then become deposited as soil eventually. Are you okay with that? Then let's look at the effect of wind on physical weathering. Now, we know that wind is air that is in motion, air that is moving, all right? Now, wind is very strong in desert regions. In these regions, the wind carries sand particles and hits them on exposed rocks, all right? Now, the continuous hitting of sand particles on exposed rocks, all right, makes tiny bits of the rock to chip off. So now, if this continues for a long time, tiny bits are chipping off every now and then. Let's say for a period of 10 years, then you will see that after the 10-year period, the rock will become smaller because very, very tiny bits of it have been chipping off over the 10-year period. All right, so that is that about physical weathering. But then the earthquakes also cause physical weathering and earth tremors as well. All right. So in this picture, you will see how wind has caused these rocks to, to weather. Now, what happens in this picture can also be that the way they are, maybe not very stable. Any strong wind can force these rocks over here to fall, and in the course of falling, would crack into smaller pieces. Do you agree with me?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's go on and look at biological weathering. Now, it is called biological because it is caused by living organisms, animals, including humans, plants, and some microorganisms. All right. Now, if you take the plants, for instance, in the pictures you see, this is a young plant growing with its roots, finding space deep down the rock. All right. Now, as the roots develops and meanders its way through the rock, it results in cracks. All right. And you see a picture of a bigger tree over here too. whose roots have penetrated deep into the rock, resulting in these huge cracks we see in the rock. All right. So that is how plants cause weathering of the rock. Now, animals. Some animals um, make their homes in the crevices of rocks, and as they move through the crevices, and some of their food finding activities would make the rocks crack further. All right. Now let's look at humans, how we also cause weathering. Now, human activities are the most important in our ecosystem because they provide or they produce the most devastating effects on the natural ecosystem. Humans do what we call construction, they do farming, they do building, and so on and so forth. And for each of these activities to be carried out, large spaces of the natural ecosystem are destroyed, including rocks. All right. Now, if you take the Ho to Accra stretch, I think before you get to Sokode Gwagame, there's some construction going on there, and you will see how rocks are being destroyed. All right. You see how rocks are being destroyed first to make the road, and then of course to pave way for the road. All right. So that's just an example. We have numerous other examples where people farm on rocks, people destroy rocks for other purposes. All right. Then of course people's buildings and okay, another classical example is what is happening at the Achimota forest, where the forest is now being destroyed to make a hotel or a recreation center. All right. So that is that about how living organisms cause weathering, and it is called bioweathering or biological weathering. Are you okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
Let's go
sir.
on. Let's look at chemical weathering. Now, chemical weathering refers to the process by which rocks break into finer particles resulting from changes in the chemical composition of the mineral constituents. All right. So the minerals that make up the rock have changes in their chemical constituents, or the chemical composition of the rock makes the rock to break. All right. So I am breaking because of what I have. All right. Or I am breaking because what I have is changing. Do you understand that? The rock is breaking because of the chemicals, or because of the chemicals it has. 1. 2, the rock is breaking because there are changes in the chemicals that it has. So that is chemical weathering. So I gave you the definition, refers to the disintegration of rock into finer pieces as a result of changes in the chemical composition of the mineral constituents, or the change in the rock that brings about a change in the chemical composition of the rock. All right. Now, for chemical weathering, there are many processes involved. In this lesson, we shall be looking at about 5 of them. All right. The first one I would like us to look at is oxidation. Oxidation. Now, oxidation of rocks refers to the reaction between the oxygen in the air, all right, or oxygen in dissolved rainwater with some rock minerals. All right. So basically, rock minerals reacting with oxygen. Where do we get the oxygen from? Oxygen in the air or oxygen dissolved in rainwater. All right. So what happens during this process is that, for instance, if a rock containing iron reacts with oxygen, then the ion, which is normally ion 2, will be oxidized to ion 3. Who is writing on the screen? Please stop. Stop. Don't interfere with the screen. Otherwise, I'll stop sharing it. All right, so I'm saying that if the rock contains iron, then the oxygen, okay, then the ion 2 will be oxidized to ion 3. Now, ion 3 is a less stable crystal structure. All right, it is not as stable as the normal ion 2. Now, if it is not stable and it's not strong enough, then any slight movement, maybe something hits it, or any slight touch can, can break it down. So I use the word mechanical. All right, so the oxidation will allow for the rock to crack down physically. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Let's go on.
Please come again.
We are saying that in oxidation, we know that rocks are made up of minerals, and an example of a mineral is the iron. All right, iron with oxidation state 2, so it's ion 2. All right, now if the ion 2 reacts with oxygen, then it becomes ion 3. All right, now the ion 3 is a weaker form of ion 2. Now, if it becomes ion 3, then the rock becomes less stable and let me say softer. All right, so the little touch, any little mechanical activity around or on the rock will make it crack. Okay, let's go on and look at reduction. The next chemical process is called reduction. Now, in reduction, the oxygen is removed from the rock minerals, all right, under poor drainage conditions. All right, now you know that water contains some oxygen or dissolved oxygen. All right, now if there is no water reaching the rocks, if there is no water reaching the rocks, then we say that there is reduction of the rocks, because of course you know that water also contains hydrogen, and during any reaction the water will lose its hydrogen in the form of hydrogen ions. All right, now if water is not getting to the rocks for a long time, then all the oxygen atoms in the rock will be removed. All right, all the oxygen elements in the rock will be removed. So now this as the oxygen is removed, it distracts the stable structure of the rock, and then it will result in a physical disintegration or mechanical disintegration. All right, now mind you, everything that is in the rock is needed for it to be stable, to be a stable structure. All right, now if any one of them is removed, then there will be a problem with the stability of the rock. So the same thing is happening here. Now the oxygen is being removed. Oxygen is being removed. All right, and so it's becomes a problem for the stability of the rock. All right, let's look at carbonation. Carbonation. Now the soil contains what we call carbonic water in the soil contains what we call carbonic acid. All right. All right. Now, carbonation means that we are reacting inorganic carbonic acid in the soil water with certain rock minerals. All right. For instance, the limestone rock contains a mineral called calcite. Calcite. All right. If calcite reacts with the inorganic carbonic acid, the result is a calcium bicarbonate, which is very soluble. All right. If the carbonic acid reacts with the the calcite, then it becomes calcium bicarbonate, and this makes the limestone to become less stable. All right. And once it is less stable, it will disintegrate at any physical interaction or mechanical interaction. All right. Now let's look at hydration. Now in hydration, we are talking about excess water over the rock minerals or over the rock. So hydration happens normally in the rainy season. What happens is that water molecules becomes rigidly attached to the rock minerals, thereby changing them into new minerals containing several molecules of water of crystallization. All right. So for instance, rocks containing copper, all right, will absorb a lot of water during the rainy season, or water molecules will become attached to copper ions. All right. Then we'll have what we call water of crystallization of these elements or minerals in the rock. When that happens, of course, you know, when something is soaked in water, the thing becomes softer, right? Then, of course, it makes the rocks soft and porous, and then break down physically in the end. All right. Now let's look at the next one, hydrolysis. Now look at this picture I'm talking to you about. This is a hard rock, all right, that that is under what we call regolith. Now the regolith is a softer unconsolidated rock that has been that is formed as a result of either oxidation, hydration, or reduction. All right. On the outer part of the rock is this regolith formed as a result of oxidation, hydration, or reduction. All right. So you see that the top is softer, but the inner is harder. All right. Now, if it rains, if rainwater that contains carbonic acid, or let's say acid rain, falls on this rock, it will react with the regolith and break the regolith down. Now, it exposes the rock. It exposes the hard rock. Once the regolith is broken, the hard rock is exposed. All right. And it leaves this rock to stand on its own. And now with time, even wind will cause these rocks to crack. Rain will cause this rock to crack. Or any animal, if this rock is touched or is hit by an elephant or a cow or a buffalo, this rock will crack down. Just imagine it like that. All right. I hope the picture makes sense to you.
Yes, sir.
So in this other picture, you see very tiny bits of the rock cracking. All right. The outermost part of the rock is the regolith that is normally softer, weaker, and less stable than what is underneath it. All right. And this is where most of the chemical reactions occur. And of course, these parts, once they tear off, then they expose the main rock. Then, mind you, once they leave, then the reaction continues on the next part. Then the next part also becomes softer, and then also falls off or cracks. All right. Then with time, you will see this whole huge rock eating away until it becomes very, very fine particles of soil. This does not happen over a short period, but it happens over a long period of time. All right. Let's continue, shall we? Let's look at the hydrolysis, the process of hydrolysis. In this process, new products that carry no water of crystallization are formed because the water molecules are not just attached. All right. So we have OH ions that react with the minerals. All right. The resulting compounds formed do not have water of crystallization, but they are new chemicals, they are new compounds that form, and they soften the rocks and result in the rock cracking anyway. All right. OH ions will react. OH ions will react with some of the minerals in the rock, but they will not form water of crystallization. Unlike in hydration, there will be water of crystallization formed, but in hydrolysis, water of crystallization will not be formed. But the new compounds formed are weaker and softer and less stable. Because of that, they will result in they will make the rocks to crack. All right. And the last one I would like to look at is the solution of rocks. In this reaction, the water on the rock surface and in the crevice will form unique function of a universal solvent by dissolving the soluble rock minerals. All right. For instance, if you have NaCl in the rock, then the water will dissolve the NaCl. You know, the NaCl is a type of salt. Or let me say all soluble salts, water soluble salts in the rock will dissolve. And once these structures that make the rock what it is dissolve, then the rock will inadvertently crack. Do you get that? Imagine that we built a small okay, we have a sugar cube, all right, made of tiny granules of sugar, right? Then we bombard a few of these granules with water and they get dissolved. What will happen to the entire structure of the sugar cube? Whatever you are thinking, you can imagine it with as a rock. If you can take the sugar cube as the rock, made up of tiny granules of soluble salts or soluble rock minerals. All right. Once each or some of these soluble minerals are dissolved by water, then the entire structure will come down cracking. All right. So that is that about chemical weathering, the processes that cause chemical weathering. We have looked at 5 of them. In fact, 6. We have looked at oxidation, reduction, carbonation, hydrolysis, hydration, and solution. All right. So take note of these terms, know how they cause the rocks to weather. And that is all we have under rock weathering. And that will end our lesson on rocks. All right. So you have these few assignments. I'll copy and paste it on the Google Classroom for you guys to do and submit on the Google Classroom platform. All right. However, in the meantime, you can just, while you wait for me to get it on the platform, you can type the answers down so that once you have it, you just copy and paste. All right. Any questions for me? If you have a question, raise your hand and then unmute yourself. Okay. If there are no questions, then let's go to our next topic, which is the nitrogen cycle. Okay. So once again, you are welcome. Let us look at what we have for the continuation of the lesson. Now, for plants to grow and do well, they need a correct balance of nutrients in the soil. All right. Now, nitrogen is the most important nutrient needed by plants for for good growth and productivity. All right. Now, it is important to study about nitrogen, because without it, the plants cannot grow, they cannot photosynthesize, and eventually they cannot produce the parts that are edible for us. If I say us, I mean we, the consumers, including humans and other animals. All right. So now let's look at the first thing we'll have to do. Now, the nitrogen cycle describes how nitrogen continuously is naturally replenished in the atmosphere. All right. So if nitrogen is lost in one part of the atmosphere, how is it replenished? How is it restored? All right. If nitrogen is too much at a particular part of the atmosphere, how is it removed? Or how is it utilized? All right, so that there is a balance in the atmosphere. All right. So the definition is that nitrogen cycle describes the continuous interlocking succession of events and processes through which nitrogen lost from the soil is naturally replenished or restored. All right. So I think you have your books. You can look up the various definitions, and then you settle for one. But this one too is not bad. So it describes the continuous interlocking succession of events and processes through which nitrogen lost from the soil is naturally replenished. All right. Now, the processes are many. And in this lesson, I would like us to look at a good number of them. But before we start, let me just introduce you briefly to them. Then we'll go into details. Now, in this picture, you would see the grasses and then you will see this tree. All right. Then I use these arrows to indicate how the movement of nitrogen in various forms, all right, occur within the atmosphere. I like you to pay close attention. Let me start from here. Can you all see the cursor on the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So starting from
Yes,
here,
sir.
great, let's continue. Starting from here, we would see a movement of, in fact, the arrows indicate the movement and the direction of movement of nitrogen, all right? Even though it's in different forms. Over here from the sky, you see nitrogen come down, all right? Now, by a process of nitrogen fixation, you will see nitrogen enter the soil, all right, by the help of nitrogen fixing bacteria, all right? Then in this form, nitrogen is converted into this other form. This is NH3. Then it is converted into this other form, which is NO2, by these bacteria. We call them nitrifying bacteria. All right. Or they are converted into NO3 by these same nitrifying bacteria. All right. Then in this form, NO3, they enter the plant roots. All right. And then once they enter, they become assimilated. So the process here is called assimilation. Or once they are in the form of NO3, they can be removed from the soil. All right. They can be removed from the soil. And that is done by what we call denitrifying bacteria, a group of bacteria called denitrifying bacteria. We shall look at the details. All right. And then the process becomes denitrification. All right. Then once the NO3 becomes denitrified, then it becomes N2. N2. And the N2 is in the air. And then eventually it comes down again. Now, the cycle could also be that instead of nitrogen becoming fixed through nitrogen fixing bacteria, it will become ammonified. So the process becomes ammonification. So instead of NH3, by the process of ammonification, we have NH4, which eventually becomes NO2. All right. Okay. So let's go into these details. First one is the nitrogen fixation. Now, nitrogen fixation means that nitrogen in the air, nitrogen in the atmosphere gets into the soil. So the process by which nitrogen in the atmosphere gets into the soil is called nitrogen fixation. All right. Now, there are many ways by which nitrogen gets into the soil. There are chemical ways, there are physical ways, there are biological ways, and there are industrial ways. Oh, fine. That was how it started, and they said they couldn't see. So when they were seeing, finally, I forgot to. So we have 4 main ways. I said chemical ways, biological ways, physical ways, and industrial ways. But in this lesson, I shall limit us to only chemical and biological ways. All right. In the chemical means or chemical nitrogen fixation, it comes from lightning. Can you see? During lightning, thunder and lightning, the electrical charges release a lot of energy.
Sir.
Yes.
Sir, please, you change the slide.
It's the same slide. I just enlarged it.
No, sir, but we have biology. Okay, yeah.
Pardon?
Yeah. Thank you.
Are
Okay, so
okay?
you went. Yeah, yes, sir. I'm okay.
Okay. So with the chemical fixation, it comes from lightning. All right. Now, during lightning, a huge amount of energy is released, all right? That makes oxygen to combine with nitrogen in the air, all right, to form nitrogen oxides or oxides of nitrogen, several oxides of nitrogen. So in this example, you would see NO2 and NO3, all right? These are different oxides of nitrogen, right? Now, these oxides react with rainwater, which washes them as nitrous acid, and then into, okay, nitrous acid and then nitric acid into the soil, all right? So what happens is that the nitric acid afterwards will be oxidized, all right? And that is the form that the nitrogen will be available to the soil, all right? So if the nitric acid is if the nitric acid is oxidized, then it becomes nitrates. And it is in the form of nitrates that the soil, the plants are able to absorb the nitrogen. Hello. So nitrogen in the air cannot be absorbed by the plants unless it is converted into nitrates, all right, before the plants can use it. So, for instance, we also eat starch, or we eat starchy foods, but the body cannot make use of the starch unless it is converted or broken down into glucose before the body can use it. The same thing with the plants. Unless the nitrogen is converted into nitrate before the plants can use it. All right. So in the second picture, you see nitrogen in the air coming down, all right, with the arrow showing. So nitrogen fixing bacteria will transform the atmospheric nitrogen into fixed nitrogen. Now the fixed nitrogen is called, or is in the form of what? Nitrates. All right, let's go on and look at the next one. How biological nitrogen fixation happens. It happens in two ways, all right? Now this is the nitrogen that is released for plants to use when they die, and other organic materials when they die, other living organisms when they die, then their organic residues become mineralized, all right? Now there are two main groups of bacteria that do the biological nitrogen fixation. There are some that are able to work under aerobic condition. Aerobic means that when there is air. There are some that are that's okay, fine. Let's look at it this way. Two main groups, all right? One group will have to be attached to the root nodules of the plant. There are some others that are just living freely in the soil, all right? Those that must be attached to the root nodules, examples are Rhizobium species and then Bradyrhizobium species, all right? So they are living together with the plants in the roots, and they help to fix nitrogen into the soil. Then the other group, they live freely in the soil. They don't have to be attached to any part of the plant before they fix the nitrogen. And even in this group, there are two of them. There are some of them that are that live under aerobic conditions, all right? And there are some that are able to survive even where there is no air. Those that live where there is a lot of air, examples are Azotobacter. Please take note of these names. Azotobacter. And those that live under anaerobic conditions, examples are the Clostridium species, all right? So they live in the soil and then convert atmospheric nitrogen into fixed nitrogen that the plants can use. All right. The next process is the production of ammonium ions, or what we call decomposition or decay. Decomposition or decay. Now, before I say what is there, look at the picture. This is a fresh apple, that has been left for some time before you realize it is decaying. It is decaying or decomposing, releasing ammonium ions, all right, into the soil. Now, ammonium ions are NH4 plus ions, all right? So you see that the N is there, nitrogen N is there, all right? So now this N will later be removed into the soil. So you see the decomposition happening. In the end, this is what you have. And if you give more time, this will eventually disappear. All right. So when plants and animals die, their organic remains are decomposed by a group of bacteria we call putrefying bacteria. Take note of that, putrefying bacteria. So the first nitrogenous end product of the decomposition is amino acids. All right. Then after some time, they will also undergo some chemical reactions to produce ammonium salts. These then the plants will absorb some gases that are also released by the decomposing organic matter. All right. Then the some of the gases will undergo what we call the nitrification process to produce ions. These ions are ammonium ions, all right, that form the soil nitrogen. And it is in this form that the soil will absorb, the plants will absorb the nutrients or the nitrogen. All right, so the nitrogen will be absorbed from the ammonium ions that are produced from this decomposition. Are you okay with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then let's
Yes,
continue. What is nitrification? Now, nitrification basically means that we are converting atmospheric nitrogen first into nitrite ions, then into nitrate ions. Take note of that. We are converting atmospheric nitrogen first into nitrite ions, then into nitrate ions. Bear in mind that the plants will absorb nitrogen in the form of nitrates, not nitrites, not ammonia. All right. Oh, okay. So the first, so the nitrification has to do with two stages. The first stage, the conversion of ions into nitrite ions, and the group of bacteria responsible for that are called nitrosomonas species. Nitrosomonas species. All right. Then right after they are converted into nitrite ions, another group of bacteria called nitrobacter will also further oxidize the nitrite ions to produce nitrate ions. All right. So in this picture, you see the chart. So the ammonia in the atmosphere is converted into nitrite ions by nitrosomonas and then oxidized by nitrobacter into nitrate ions or nitrates. All right. Now the opposite of nitrification is denitrification. All right. So the opposite happens. So the ammonia, the nitrate ions in the soil are now reduced. Opposite of oxidation is reduction, right? So they are now reduced by Pseudomonas and Planococcus. It's not here. Yes, Planococcus is there. Great. It's reduced by Planococcus into nitrites. Then these nitrites are further, reduced by Bacillus, Pseudomonas, Clostridium, and Planococcus again. All right, into atmospheric nitrogen. Okay, so let's see how the process goes. So this process involves the reduction of the nitrate ions into gaseous nitrogen that escapes from the soil. All right. Now the nitrate is reduced by denitrifying bacteria such as Planococcus, and other examples are Bacillus, Pseudomonas, and Clostridium. All right. Now, the loss of soil nitrogen through, other processes by which nitrogen can be lost from the soil includes leaching. Now, leaching is the washing of plant nutrients or soil nutrients deep down the soil so that it cannot be reached by plants. Then, of course, soil erosion and crop removal. Anytime we remove the crops from the soil, then we are also inadvertently removing nitrogen from the soil. All right. So that is that about nitrification and denitrification. What is the importance of the nitrogen cycle at all? Now, the nitrogen cycle is important because it supplies available forms of nitrogen from the non-available atmospheric nitrogen for plant use. All right, so basically it converts nitrogen into nitrate ions for plants. All right, it releases nitrogen that is locked up. All right, nitrogen that otherwise would have been locked up in plant and animal tissues for plants to use. So, for instance, if the plant or animals die, they have a lockup of nitrogen within the tissues. All right. So microorganisms would have to decompose them to release these nitrogen compounds for plants to use. This only happens because of the nitrogen cycle. All right. Now, it's also important because it sustains beneficial microbial growth and activities in the soil, thereby enhancing the soil structure and the soil's productivity. So what we mean by that is, you see the number of microorganisms we have mentioned, all right? It is because of the nitrogen cycle that their lives are sustained. And because of their activities, again, nitrogen is fixed into the soil. And by that, they improve soil, the structure of the soil, and make the soil to be productive. All right. Then, of course, it maintains nutrient balance in the soil, because at every time nitrogen must be used, and at every time nitrogen must be released. All right. So the continuous cycle of nitrogen in the atmosphere makes the nutrients in the soil balanced. All right. Now, if nitrogen is not cycled in the atmosphere, what will happen is that parts of plants and animals that die will remain on the surface of the soil and smell. All right. So let's look at the last part. So the nitrogen cycle supplies nitrogen to plants for their normal vegetative growth, and this vegetative growth will serve as feed for both humans and other animals. All right. So that is the end of the nitrogen cycle. There's another flow chart over here for you to consider. It's the same thing I talked about in this picture. All right. So you can see how atmospheric nitrogen gets into the soil and how nitrates from the soil become atmospheric nitrogen. Okay. So if you have questions, please raise your hand, and then I'll let you unmute, and then you can ask.
Sir, please, I want to see that.
Pardon? Who is asking a question?
No, I wanted you to repeat the assignment again.
I can't hear you.
Sir, please, I wanted you to show that assignment. Since it's done, it's okay.
Which one?
This one, the one on the screen.
This one. Yeah, so we'll talk about it. But I want you to ask questions if you have questions. All right, if there are no questions, then I have some questions for you. So you explain these terms as far as the nitrogen cycle is concerned: nitrification, denitrification, nitrogen fixation, ammonification, and assimilation. Then you list three importance of the nitrogen cycle: first to plants and then to animals. All right. So this one too, you type the answers down. All right. Maybe we'll be able to set up the Google Forms. Then I'll let you have, I'll introduce you to the Google Forms. All right. Then you do that one online. I'll just time you, maybe this can be done in less than 10 minutes. So if within 10 minutes I give you this, you should be able to do. Then I'll mark it online.
Understand.
Okay, so what you do is while you wait,
Sir,
just
please, I
type.
don't understand.
While you wait for me to, to let you have it, you can type the answers down because you have the slides, right? I've sent you these slides on the Google Classroom and then the notes as well. So you can read and then get your answers and type them down. Once I'm ready, then I'll let you let me have them. Okay, if you don't have any more to ask me, then I'd like to take a leave of you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Remember to stay safe.
Sir,
Yes.
please, should we type it as in type it or write it down?
No, type with your phones.
Yes, sir.
All right, so it's a bye from me.